Hello and welcome to West Indies on 99.94 cricket every day. My name is Mashal St. Patrick here, one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and with me as ever is my co-host, Santoki Nagilendran. West Indies on 99.94 is your new home for West Indies content, and we will be dropping into your podcast feed on YouTube or the 99.94 app 3 times every week. Thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. Today on West Indies on 99.94, we are going to be discussing the all-conquering Barbados Royals. Santoki, take it away.
Yeah, Mash. Well, this season in the CPL, there's been one standout team. Unfortunately for both of us, it's not the Talawars or the Amazon Warriors. It has been the Barbados Royals, who have cruised to 7 wins out of their first 8 games. And we're going to analyse how have they managed to be so successful this season, bearing in mind last season they had a really, really poor performance. So, Mash, I guess if we're looking at a T20 side, I guess all successful T20 sides have a core, a spine, who will all perform well at the same time and build that side momentum. And I think if you look at the Barbados Royals side, it's fair to say there are 4 key players at the moment. We've got Carl Mayers opening, Quinton de Kock, Jason Holder, and Obed McCoy. Sort of those 4 are the outstanding performers who are sort of taking this side on this successful run, Mash. And I guess it's only right we look at the top. Carl Mayers, from your perspective, does he look at the moment like an opening batsman who will be successful at the World Cup?
I mean, his recent innings notwithstanding, where he hit like an epic 1 off 17. That innings notwithstanding, really and truly, Santoki, what we have to say about Carl Mayers is he's having a breakout year. And I think we have to even look bigger than Barbados Royals. He's had a breakout year in tests. In fact, let's go all the way back to that epic double century versus Bangladesh during the pandemic last year. So it's really from that point onwards. So he's had a breakout year in tests. He's had a breakout year in T20s. He's had the breakout year kind of in ODIs. He's an all-format player, Santoki. And to kind of put into perspective where Carl Mayer's game is at, you can no longer formulate or think about any West Indies side in any format where you don't have Carl Mayer's name involved. There might be discussions about where you play him in the team, but his form is such that he's undroppable. And there have been, well, he is the only one. He has been the best exponent. Well, Johnson Charles might want to have a conversation about that, in fairness. But other than Johnson Charles, he's been the best exponent of how to play in the power play. Get off quickly or get out. And more often than not, he's got off quickly and as a result, taken the game away from the opposition.
Yeah, 100%. I think he sort of stood out. As you said, at the moment, he's the second highest run scorer in the CPL, just below Johnson Charles. And I think he's really stood out. I guess the only concerning thing, Max, as you rightly mentioned, his last 2 innings, he scored, I think, 1 off 17. Then against Trinbago, it was 9 off 20. But you could account that to him just not playing well on the Trinidadian pitches. But generally, throughout, as you said, for the past, year and a half, 2 years, he's been excelling at all formats. And it's really good to see him kind of get his moment in the spotlight and excel in his way. He's just a very, very confident batsman at the moment. Now, another talking point we've got is his opening partner, Rakeem Cornwall. He's been in and out of the Barbados Royal side. Do you think it's been a bit unfair on Jimbo to not get an extended run at the top of the order? Do you think his sort of credentials as an opener have been underestimated?
Yeah, so there's a stat out there, and I'm sure the major cricket statisticians will reply to us at Carib Cricket, or if they're watching on YouTube in the comments below, etc. But there's a stat out there that Rakeem Cornwall is one of the most devastating players in the power play in world cricket, sorry. And the reason why is because Rakeem understands the power play mandate better than so many other players. When you watch Rakeem, it doesn't matter what the pitch is saying, and no more so than the recent performance against Guyana. That was a low, slow, sluggish pitch. And to all intents and purposes, that pitch required, I guess, digging in and waiting for your chance to score a 4 or score a 6. But Rakeem took the exact same approach he takes to every innings, which is I'm either scoring big runs quickly, or I'm out. I'm not wasting time manipulating the strike for one run. My mandate here is to score big runs and score them quickly, or get out and let somebody else get on with the job. And here's the thing, Santoki. So Rakeem's stats, if I just quickly bring them up, he's played 5 matches. He's had a bit of a niggling injury, which might be why he missed some of the games. 5 matches, 107 runs. His strike rate, which is the most important thing, is 133. And when you consider that next to him is Carl Mayer's strike rate is 140, 141, you can understand why the Royals have been so devastating, because both batters have been just getting off to electric starts. But what stood out for Rakeem this season is he's also been bowling more than we often see. 5 matches, yes, they're only 7 overs, but the point is he's been contributing 4 wickets with an economy of 5.57, and it's good to see the Royals trust Rakeem with the ball in particular matches, and I'm sure he'll come into his own more so when we now move to the Guyana leg of the tournament. But this is what I want to put you about Jimbo and Toki.
Mm.
Given with the West Indies T20 World Cup selection that fitness clearly didn't matter, as seen with Sheldon Cottrell getting in the side, Evan Lewis has got in the squad, and there's been a clear indication that, well, boy, we might have waived the fitness requirements somewhat. Jimbo seems to have fallen off the scene in Test cricket, and he's never really been mentioned in T20 cricket. And I just wonder, Santoki, what's the way back for Jimbo in international colours? Because there seems to kind of be this unwritten, there seems to be like this unwritten message that everyone kind of knows, but no one's really saying it, that they've now decided that he's too big and he can't play for West Indies. But when you have somebody who clearly understands their role as well as Jimbo, can we really afford to not think about someone like that?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's sort of almost like a taboo subject. No one wants to talk about Jimbo's size, effectively changing how people view him. Because if you look at in Test cricket, he was the premier spinner. I think what was it in that Afghanistan series in 2019, he got 10 wickets, for instance. And then going forward 2020, 2021, he was the premier spinner. He performed well with the bat as well. But we suddenly see him drop from the side after some poor form, and then other spinners such as Moti getting a shot, and it's like there's no way for Jimbo to work his way in. In T20 cricket, at least at international level, Jimbo's never been given the opportunity. And I think there is a stigma based on his size and the belief that his size equates to a lack of fitness, because we don't know whether he's failed any fitness tests. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't. But there's a presumption that him being that big means he's not fit. I also think, if you remember a few years ago, do you remember in CPL, I think he was playing for St. Lucia when he basically tried to retire out and Pollard just cussed him out on the pitch. I think that has sort of, because that clip still gets replayed today sometimes on social media. I think that's sort of helped the image that he's an unfit player, his size, he needs to work on his size. And I think the selectors have not given an opportunity, particularly in T20 cricket, because of that, because it's a format where you have to be at your fittest. So I think he's been essentially unfairly prejudiced because of his size. So it'd be interesting to see. I feel like he'd have to have a real breakout, like a Johnson Charles season where he's top of the leaderboards, for him to kind of have his name in the hat for a T20 international call-up. And even then, I'm not sure if that would work, but you feel like he would need to do that to essentially get a chance. But coming up to, what is he, 29 years old? It's hard to see how he'll be able to do that. Bearing in mind, he's had an average season in terms of getting runs in CPL this year. So you'd imagine he'd have to wait for next year. It's hard to see whether he will get that opportunity. But considering Evan Lewis has been out of the side and we've sort of been trying out different openers, it does seem a bit scandalous that Rakeem Cornwall hasn't at least been given an opportunity in bilateral series to have a go at opening. As you say, his style of opening is very unique. He understands how you need to bat in the power play, and it can be successful for teams.
Yeah, most definitely. And with him being at the Royals, I just wonder if I guess I'm slightly surprised that Rakeem Cornwall's never got T20 bags around the world.
Mm.
I mean, Azam Khan does. He's a big guy. I'm surprised that Rakeem Cornwall doesn't. He gets like the minor league cricket bag in the United States. Maybe Rakeem doesn't want to put his name forward for the other leagues, but I'm just surprised that people haven't taken a gamble on Rakeem, whether that be in BPL or whatever it might be. So maybe we'll see his name elsewhere in other leagues sooner rather than later. But I think one thing that we should discuss as well, Santoki, because you kind of set the scene at the top of the show. Let's not forget that the Royals have been terrible the last 2 seasons. They've gone from winning CPL in 2019, then the pandemic came, rubbish in 2020, rubbish in 2021. Like this is an amazing turnaround for the franchise. And one of one of the reasons I wonder behind it is how much David Miller's captaincy might have played a role here. Now, when you talk about Barbados, it's synonymous with Jason Holder, who's been captain forever, and the Royals made a big decision to move on past Jason this year, give the captaincy to David Miller. The 60 captaincy went to Carl Mayers, and the on my understanding is when Miller and Quinton de Kock leave to go and play that India South Africa series, Carl Mayers will get the captaincy. So I'm just wondering, Santoki, what do you feel about, or how do you react to the fact that they've moved on past Jason? Do you think that's freed Jason up? Because it doesn't seem to have hampered his performances. I mean, if you look at Jason's
Yeah,
performances
yeah.
with both the bat and the ball, he's been fine.
Yeah, I think yesterday's game against Guyana was a perfect example of Jason's prowess in the format. He scored 40, top scored, and then he took 2 wickets, only conceded 8 runs in his spell. So I think that showed his all-round capabilities. And I think just going back to David Miller, I think David Miller was essentially a perfect candidate to take over as captain because I think I read a stat that he's the most capped T20 player at the world going to the World Cup. He's played 400 T20s, more than Rohit Sharma, more than Virat Kohli. So he's very, very experienced. He knows what to do. And he has a level of calmness, if you notice, like on the pitch. He doesn't really seem to let anything phase him. But I guess that comes with the territory. If you've played 400 T20s, you've experienced all scenarios, you know what to do. So I think that's not only freed up Jason Holder, but having an experienced captain who also wasn't with the Barbados Royals before. So he's coming with a fresh mind to kind of look at the problems and help that. I think it's just combined to work well. And obviously, he's got his South African compatriots, Corbin Bosch and Quinton de Kock, who he'll know very well. They performed well in the middle of the order. So I think all the ingredients have kind of combined to make a successful captaincy for David Miller. And it also links to this sort of wider branding of, I mean, we haven't touched on it yet, but we had Jake Lush McCrum come on, the Royal CEO, on the last episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And he talked about how he wants to unify Rajasthan Royals, Barbados Royals, and Par Royals in South Africa. David Miller's been announced as the Par Royals captains for the South African T20 next year. So you sort of feel like he's going to be like a figurehead for the Royals brand, and him sort of winning CPL, leading Barbados in his way, is just adding another string to his bow. So I think it was a great captaincy choice to have Miller there. As you said, though, him and de Kock are going. It'll be interesting to see how that influences then the side's performances going into the final stages, especially de Kock, because his experience gets a lot of runs in the middle of the order. So be interesting to see how they sort of replace them or how they fill in the gaps. You do feel they have the quality with Jason Holder, Azam Khan in the middle to kind of replace that. But it will be a massive blow, however you want to see it, David Miller and de Kock going. But Mash, I guess let's talk about the bowling department for Barbados Royals, because they've been excelling with the bat, but they've also been excelling with the ball. Now, one player who's stood out, Obed McCoy. Now, he's someone who's had fitness issues in the past. It seems like he's put them behind him, Mash. He's been playing, he played for Sussex in the Vitality Blast T20 in England, played for bilaterals for West Indies. Now he's had a clean run playing for Barbados Royals. So all signs look good at going into the World Cup for Obed McCoy.
Yeah, I think if we chart the story back to last year's World Cup, so again, this feels like a 1 year story arc for Obed McCoy. In the summer prior to the 2021 World Cup, Obed McCoy was the standout bowler for the West Indies. And as the West Indies approached that World Cup, it was very much a case of nobody thought, okay, you and I thought we'd win it. But what I mean is, we assumed that in winning it, Obed McCoy would be crucial due to his variations, his off-pace deliveries, the quicker ones, the Yorkers, the slow ball bouncers, etc. Almost like Dwayne Bravo's heir apparent in terms of his ability to bowl different types of balls. Then he gets injured along with Fabian Allen just before the World Cup. It still probably hasn't been overstated enough how much that probably messed up West Indies preparations. We now fast forward a year, and Obed seems to be, touch wood, over his injury problems. Because if you look at Obed's career, he usually seems to break down every 6 months or so. He's now played relatively consistently for the last year, and as you say, had the stint with Sussex in the UK as well. He's currently up there, just behind I think Alzari Joseph in terms of top wicket takers in the tournament. And he had a slow start, but again, if you pull up his stats, 8 matches, 13 wickets for a cost of 203 runs. So taking a wicket on average every 15.6. Sorry, his average is 15.6 and an economy of 8.12. I think Obed would be honest and say he'd rather that economy be a bit lower. But the point is he's a wicket taking bowler. And Santoki, more importantly, more so than being a wicket taking bowler, this is what Obed offers both to the Royals and ultimately to West Indies. One, he can bowl at any stage of the innings. Power play, out the power play, middle overs, death overs, that type of versatility. Look at the talent around the region. We don't have someone like that. Bravo was the only other player I think you could ever say could do something like that, right? So his versatility. Two, obviously, in terms of what he can do with the ball, but most importantly of all, he's a strike bowler. That's and if we look at, he hasn't played ODIs yet, and I don't know if he'll ever play ODIs, but that's the most sought after skill set that West Indies have been missing in the last year and a bit when it comes to T20 cricket. Someone the captain can throw the ball to and say, "Can you buy me a wicket?" So it's exciting to see Obed in this form. We touch wood and hope that he doesn't break down before the World Cup. And I for one, Santoki, would feel a lot more confident if West Indies go into the World Cup qualifiers with a fit Obed McCoy and actually an Alzari Joseph as well.
Yeah, 100%. And it'd be interesting to know, sort of, as you said, Obed McCoy is almost an anomaly in West Indian cricket. Just that ability to have the variations and bowl in the power plays. Nobody else in the region has sort of been able to replicate that. It'd be interesting to see, because he hasn't obviously learned that in the system. It'd be interesting to learn where he picked that up or how he developed those skills, because no one else in the region seems to be able to do that. I'd be interested to know whether it's a natural thing, whether he's just been naturally able to do it, or he's worked with a specific coach, or if there was a particular tournament where he picked it up. I know he sort of made his breakthrough in the Canadian Global T20 League, where he was the leading wicket taker. But it'd be interesting to know, because we haven't got anyone else who comes close. If Obed McCoy was injured, as we saw last year, we had to sort of rely on Ravi Rampal. There's no one sort of in that age category of 25 to 30 who can do what Obed McCoy does. And that shows you, arguably, he's the most valuable player for West Indies at the moment. If a Nicholas Pooran or a Hetmeyer got injured, for instance, we have batsmen who can kind of come in and try and replicate that. With Obed McCoy, is Obed McCoy or nothing. We don't really have anyone who can come in and do his job. Alzari Joseph is good as support, but I don't think Alzari Joseph can do the same job in terms of getting those wickets, being a consistent strike bowler. And I think with Obed McCoy, because of these previous fitness issues, as you said, he's not going to play the longer formats. I think he played 2 ODIs in 2018 against India, but since then he hasn't been called up for any ODI. So he's just basically essentially focused as a T20 player. So that means his strength is always going to be in the format. Contrastingly to like a Carl Mayers who's spread out across all formats, Obed McCoy is essentially a gun T20 player, and he's going to be massive for the West Indies going forward. And it is good to see him getting the wickets and looking sharp in this CPL match. But if we look at the rest of the Barbados Royal side, in terms of spinners, now you covered the game against Guyana. I think it was Mujeeb got 4 runs conceded in his 4 overs, took a bag of wickets. Mash, just how good is Mujeeb Ur Rahman?
Listen, what he produced versus Guyana was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm sure somebody can come back to me and say, "Oh, but I've seen this bowler do X." But in the context of the match, Barbados has only made 107 off their 16 overs after Duckworth Lewis had revised everything. Guyana had to make 111, and I just don't think the spell I saw from Mujeeb, he basically was bowling as if he could do what he wants. And it wasn't like Guyana were just trying to see him off. The batters just couldn't, they had nothing to counteract what he was doing. And again, I say those figures again, 4 overs, 1 for 4. That basically choked out Guyana before they could even start their response. So, and I think probably the wider thing to say about Mujeeb is that, and you made reference to it earlier on, Miller and de Kock are going. And I think I heard yesterday that Barbados aren't drafting in any replacements for Miller and de Kock. Harry Tector's already in the squad, so he will be one of them. and it looks like Mujeeb is effectively the other one. Now, there's arguments to say about how does that replace Miller's batting and De Kock's batting, which I think we should get into afterwards. But every CPL Santoki, there's basically two gun players. I won't name the other one actually because we probably shouldn't, but there's some gun players who always come to CPL and you just know you are guaranteed to get excellent performances. And I feel like Mujeeb, name a CPL where Mujeeb's been bad. It don't matter what team he plays for. You're basically, when you get a player like Mujeeb in CPL, you're basically guaranteeing he's going to be able to just win you some games. He'll always be consistent. He'll never go for licks. Kind of like Narain for Trimbago. You know those bowlers where it's just like, no matter what happens, it's going to be 4 overs for pretty much nothing, and you're going to take at least 1 wicket. You might take 3, and that is a guarantee. Those type of players are gold dust.
Yeah, he's the type of player. It's almost as if they are isolated from the rest of the team. No matter what's happening, you could be taking licks. The team could be scoring 200, but Mujeeb will bowl 4 for like 12 runs, like a Narain. They're just bowling. They just know exactly what they're doing. They know what they need to do in those 4 overs, and they bowl it. So he's someone who's sort of guaranteed to kind of perform. And all the ingredients, as you said, it'll be interesting to how this Miller and De Kock leaving affects them. But the good thing for them is they've got 2 more group games where they've got nothing to lose. They've already topped the group, so they can sort of experiment and see how it works heading into the playoff rounds. Now, Mash, I guess in our last episode, we talked about Trimbago and the end of a dynasty. Now, Barbados Royals, as we alluded to earlier, they've been assigned to sort of the Royals dynasty. So Par Royals in South Africa, Rajasthan Royals in India. It'd be interesting to see if Barbados Royals will be the next dynasty, because it looks like at the moment, so for instance, a Corbin Bosch was signed for Rajasthan Royals, then he was placed in the Barbados Royals. So it looks like they'll have more resources now. If someone excels in the Rajasthan Royals, for instance, earlier in the IPL, they'll fast track them into the Barbados Royals side. And it seems like because of now the vested interest from the Royals group, there'll be more resources and more players, high quality players thrown into the side. So I think it will get to a stage where Barbados Royals could potentially start the next CPL dynasty rather than Trimbago Knight Riders, just because it seems like obviously the Trimbago Knight Riders are aligned with the Kolkata Knight Riders, but there just seems to be more consistency, more of a brand with the Royals at the moment. And it seems like, speaking to Jake Josh, on the last episode, it just seems like there's more of a vision to kind of build all the Royals to be the top sides in their league. So I think we could be seeing the next dynasty with the Barbados Royals. And unfortunately for Guyanese fans, it does feel like Shimron Hetmeyer will be the next piece of the jigsaw to go to the Royals sooner rather than later, similar to what we saw with how it felt inevitable Pooram will be going to the Trimbago Knight Riders at some point. It just feels inevitable that Hetmeyer, he's had enough probably with Guyana at the moment, might just end up going to the Royals because, you know, it will suit with him being part of the Rajasthan Royals setup.
Well, if anybody wants to direct their cuss out, it's Santoki you must direct the cuss out too after that comment. But I actually think you're making a good point though, Santoki, because I will draw the parallel with Dre Russ. You will know that as a Talawars fan, I've been saying for the last 3 years, Dre's obviously going to go to TKR. Dre's obviously going to go to TKR. It took 3 years to happen, but the inevitable happened. And now you're in the exact same position with Hetmeyer that I was in, where I'm assuming that even if Hetmeyer stays to captain Guyana next year, you'll be saying to me, he's obviously going to go to the Royals at some point, though. Certain moves in CPL, you just know that they're going to happen. And it's going to have to happen, happen at some point. But picking up that point you made about dynasty and creating a legacy, more than anything else, though, and this references back to Jake Lush McCrum. People, if you haven't listened to that podcast episode, if we plug our own podcast for ever so quickly, do go and listen to episode 73 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast to delve into that conversation with Jake Lush McCrum, the CEO. Now, but one thing that stood out for me this tournament, Santoki, is, and the thing is, you and I said this prior to the tournament starting. We said that the Royals looked like the dark horses of the tournament. But the reason why we were saying it before the tournament started, Santoki, is because we looked at their squad and there seemed to be a clear plan, a clear team construction plan. If you think about what we'd said about them in 2020 and 2021, the reason why we said they were a weak side in the previous 2 editions of CPL was that they just stacked their team with all-rounders, and the team didn't really make any sense in terms of role definition. You look at this team now, if we just quickly talk through it, Mayers and Cornwall clearly know what their mandate is. De Kock comes in at 3. He don't even need to know what his mandate is. He's Quinton de Kock. Okay. Then you've got Corbin Bosch, who's travelled over, like you say, from the Rajasthan Royals. You've got David Miller, who's a finisher, to come in. Azam Khan, who's a finisher, to come in. Jason Holder is a floating role, but effectively comes in at number 7, so to speak. Everybody's role there is clear. And then when you look at the bowlers, you've got Obed McCoy with the ability to bowl at various stages of the innings. Again, Jason Holden need no explanation. Carl Mayers can chip in. Rakeem Cornwall can chip in when needed. Mujeeb has now arrived. We know he's consistent. And we should special mention to the youngster Ramon Simmons, the emerging player, who has looked brilliant in the games that he has got as well. And I guess the point that I'm making about the Royals is just that no matter who plays, it always looks like they're playing to a specific role in the team. And I don't know if you get what I mean by that, Santoki, because there's been games that you and I have watched when we've been covering them for CPL this year where sometimes you're just watching them. I don't know if you've had this feeling where you just watch them and like, so what's the tactic? It almost feels like, boy, just go out there and see if you can try a ting. Do you know what I mean? Whereas with the Royals, it seems to clearly be that's your role. Now go and execute that particular job that you've been given. Whereas other teams, I just get the sense of, well, if it comes off today, it comes off.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a really simple idea to execute, but as you said, a lot of franchises just haven't given their players role definitions. Looking from the outside, Trinbago and Guyana being classic examples, as we've analysed in previous episodes. So, as you said, it's a simple tactic in Barbados Royals. It seems like everyone knows their job, and maybe that just comes with the think tank having that experience of being IPO owners and other franchise league owners. They just know exactly what it takes, the recipe for success in franchise leagues. So it looks like, Barbados Royals are clearly ahead of everyone in the group stages. But as we've seen, Mash, in previous years of the CPL, often the team that tops the group in the playoffs fumbles when it comes to the semi-final or fumble the final, just because there's that added pressure based on what they've done in the group stages. So whilst Barbados Royals are running clear at the moment, they've still got a massive job to do in the semi-finals and finals. And with key players missing, it'd be interesting to see if they can sort of hold up that quality going forward into the last week in Guyana, Mesh.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm putting all the listeners on the spot as well. And you have to, if you're going to comment, you have to comment within an hour of listening to this podcast. So whether that be atting us at Twitter at Carib Cricket, or whether it be commenting below if you're watching on YouTube. As things stand right now, Santoki, the next games aren't until Wednesday and Thursday. Who do you think will win the tournament? Do you think the Royals can go all the way and basically just maintain the form? Even the one defeat they've had has been via Duckworth Lewis, so it's not like they've actually been really beaten yet. So do the Royals win this, or do they do a Guyana and get to the final and then fumble the bag? So putting you on the spot somewhat, Santoki, who wins this from here?
You know what? It's an interesting one because there's two levels for it. For me, if Trinbago don't make the top 4, Barbados Royals will win it. I think Barbados Royals have enough quality, and they have obviously won as a franchise. They've won it in 2019. I think that will get them across the line. However, I think if it comes down to a final between Barbados Royals and Trinbago, I can imagine Trinbago sneaking it with that added experience and know-how. So for me, it sort of depends on whether Trinbago make the top 4. If Trinbago don't make it, I see Barbados winning it clearly. If Trinbago make it, I can imagine, just because of what we've seen in previous years with knockout rounds, I can imagine Trinbago somehow managing to lift the title.
Know that I'm not going to answer my own questions. so, I just wanted to see what you would say. I will provide an answer once we know what the final 4 is. But Santoki, that's been our somewhat of a deep dive onto the Royals and their success thus far this season. For people listening to the show, if you love the language of cricket and want more, then please do head over to the 99.94 app, and you can hear all of the podcasts from all the various different nations, all of the cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. So don't just listen to West Indies on 99.94. I mean, please do. And leave a review and a rating. Like, subscribe. Do all of that jazz, people. But more importantly of all, do listen to all of our friends over at 99.94, England, Sri Lanka, South Africa, India, etc. Do listen to them all. But Santoki, that's goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yeah, it's a goodbye for me. And just to reiterate what Michelle said, yeah, if you like these deep dives into CPL franchises, I'm not sure any other sort of platforms, channels are doing these analysis of CPL squads. If you like it, as you said, leave a review whether you're listening to it on Apple, Spotify. If you're on YouTube, like it, comment, subscribe, and we're happy to engage in any discussions or any contrasting opinions you may have on what we've said about the squads. But from me and Michelle, that's it for now, and we'll see you on the other side.
Stay locked, people.